Welcome to the third presentation in the series where we're looking at the book of Leviticus. In the previous book, Exodus, God had directed Moses to say to the people they would be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. That was God's purpose for this people group. And it raises questions. Kingdom of priests? Their task was to make God real to the people groups round about. And they would do this by the quality of their living. And these principles still apply to us today. The book is set in the days of Moses. It gives a framework, not a rule book, a framework for desert living, a framework to prepare them to move forward into the land that God had given to them, to fulfill the destiny that God had for them. That's the background of the book. And in the last presentation we looked at the strange world of sacrifices. We unfolded just the facts and the procedures. Now we're going to look a bit more at the meaning. There were 5 groups of sacrifices that are mentioned. Burnt offerings. The person laid their hands on the animal, a symbol of confession of their faults. And the animal was totally destroyed. Grain offerings, most of it wasn't burnt, but was given to the priests as food. Peace offerings, only part of the animal was burned. Again, there was this confession of failure, hands laid on, pressed onto the animal. Purification offerings, again, only part of the animal was burned in the tabernacle, the remainder outside the camp. And again, confession, things that we've done wrong, perhaps by mistake. And then reparation offerings, that the things we do wrong have consequences for other people, and we have to put it right. And it specifies how to do this. Now let's look a bit further and ask some questions about this. These are the questions we left at the end of the previous presentation. Why do we have these strange procedures that make so little sense in a 21st century context? Why is there such an emphasis on blood? In most of the sacrifices, an animal was killed. And what on earth is meant by that word atonement, which occurs from time to time in the descriptions in the first 5 chapters of Leviticus? People who criticize the Bible, they'll pick on a book like Leviticus and say, what kind of God would mandate all this? These people fail to understand that you've got to read a book, any book, in its context. And the context is a desert people, a group of people who had been rescued from slavery, were in a desert situation, preparing for a lifelong task. And we've got to interpret it in terms of the context. I want to explore that a bit further in this presentation. So with that background in mind, let's move forward. Now that, in the days of Moses, was a radically new idea. The gods of the nations, and in particular the sun god in the Egyptian culture, God was not seen that kind of way. There were gods who had partial responsibility, and their understanding, the people's understanding of their gods, was very much that they were like human beings, and like human beings did good and they did bad. The idea of God being perfect and holy is a new idea. But what's not new is that we humans are rebellious. We want to do things our way. We think we know best. And immediately that setup generates a problem. A problem of relationship between a God who is perfect and holy and we human beings who want to do it our own way. We think we know better than God. And we get a relationship problem arising from this. Now that's where sacrificial offerings fit. There's a negative side to them. There's a positive side to them. It goes both ways. Negatively, there's a recognition that we have messed up, and an expression that we want to put things right. We want to live a better way. God's way of living, because God made us, is the best way, and He wants the best way for us. God is love. He always wants the best for us. And yet, in our desire to do it our own way, we often lose out on the best in life. So it's a recognition of that, plus a desire to put things right. They brought an animal. They laid their hands on the animal. These are physical expressions of recognition of past failures and a desire to put things right. Positively, sacrifices are expression of faith. It's our response to God. We want to do it His way. It's a gratitude to God. Now, this people group had an enormous amount to be grateful for. They'd been rescued from slavery. And the slavery was slavery. They were being exploited and brutalized as free labor. Now they were a free people. And as they went through the desert experience, they experienced something of God's provision for them in direction, food, water supplies, and looking after them. Much to be grateful for. Sacrificial offerings are an outward expression of inner response to God. Now just ponder that for a moment. If there's no inner response, then you can make as many sacrificial offerings as you like, and they're just a waste of time. Religious ritual and performance achieves nothing unless it's an expression of an inner response that's within us. And many of the prophetic books that were written later make this point very, very strongly. God is not interested in the sacrifices, one prophet said. Put your hearts right. Where's the inner response? Do you really want to put things right? Do you really recognize you've messed up? But sacrificial offerings are an outward expression. It's a physical, tangible way of expressing what is inside you. And for a people group who knew so little, almost none of whom could read or write, whose knowledge of God was so limited, here was an action, an outward expression. There's a vivid symbol of inner response. Now I want to go a little bit deeper than that. This was the revelation that God brought. And God had quite a problem in getting the people to understand this. Moses is beginning to understand this. God is the sovereign Lord of the universe. There is only one God, and God is one. He made everything. And as the book of Genesis says, He made it and He looked upon it and it was good, very good. The entire created world that is around us is very good. It's been messed up by demonic and satanic activity, but it was basically very good. And He made us. And He didn't make a mistake. We mess up by our rebellion. But within us, There's the potential of greatness, and God wants that greatness to be released. He wants the very, very, very best for us. Stop again for a moment. He wants the very best for you. No matter what life may throw at you, no matter how much you may have messed up in the past, God still wants the best for you. And in you, there is so much potential, because God made you with that. Now, because of that logic, there is such a thing as right and wrong. God in himself, by his very nature, stands for all that is right, good, ethical, and moral. And things that go against that are simply wrong. They are not the very best for us. They do not produce the best in relationships, in the way we treat each other. They do not give us fulfillment and let the potential within us be released. They are wrong. Now, this kind of view cuts right across the conventional views of 21st century Western society. But that's what this understanding in Leviticus is saying. God is perfect. That's the standard. It is right. And what is not perfect goes against it, and it is wrong. But Leviticus moves on. What it is stressing is this, that human rebellion, our desire to run our lives our way, it has inevitable consequences as night follows day. Consequences for ourselves, consequences for relationships, consequences for God himself. But in practical terms, it means that we miss out on God's best in life. We miss out on it individually, but we also may mess up other people, and they miss out on God's best. That's not what God wants. God wants the best, and he wants to release us to the best. And this is built into his very own nature and his creation. Again, that statement so often contradicts the way our cultures have gone in the 21st century. Our decisions have consequences, for good or ill. And when we want to do it our way, we build things around our selfish desires, there are consequences. Consequences for us, consequences for the future, consequences for other people, maybe innocent bystanders. Within ourselves, we damage the divine image. God has placed a divine image within us. We are like God in the sense that we are spiritual beings. We are like God in the sense that we can do what God does. We are gifted with creativity, and we have the potential for love, for caring for each other. That is damaged by our rebellion. But our rebellion also damages relationships in every direction. Relationships within families, within communities, in the workplace, even relationships in the way we treat our planet. It's disturbed in every direction. Our selfishness, want to do it our way, not God's way. We lose out, and relationships lose out. And what Leviticus and the sacrificial system is saying is this: if we want things to move forward, the damage has to be corrected. Ritual doesn't do that. Offering sacrifices doesn't do that. It comes from within us. The sacrifices are an expression of what is within us. And the sacrifices are costly. Indeed, there's a cost to God himself as well as a cost to ourselves. It costs us to admit we got it wrong. It costs us to want to go God's way and to dethrone the selfishness that is within us. In a moment we'll see the cost to God, at least by analogy. Now let's look at a little picture from life, the imaginary wonderful family. But families aren't always like that. Children aren't always just perfect. They rebel. And parents have to take action, sent to the room, sent away, reprimanded. And if it's a teenager, the teenager doesn't even listen to the reprimand. Relationships go all over the place. Now, I'm using this as a picture. That basically is you and me. How many times we take decisions, and we take decisions on the basis of what's best for us. I want to do it my way. That's in the practical things of life. Now we're called to take decisions. We're given responsibility to do it. We mustn't shirk it. But we need to take decisions on the basis of what's best for others. Because that reflects God's nature. That's His way, and that's the best for life. And if we all took our decisions that way, what a wonderful world it would be. But we don't. And as any parent will tell you, when the child goes astray and rebels in any way, there's a cost to the parent. Disappointment, hurt, and self-doubt. But it costs the child or the teenager. Oh, how hard it is to admit they got it wrong. That their parents do know best. Now, the analogy is not perfect, but it points to the picture when we rebel against God and decide to run our lives our way. We know best. We don't need God. If you like, and I say this reverently, there's a cost to God. Hurt. Because He knows that if we go that way, we'll miss out on the best. And we're disappointed. But it's tough on the person, the you and me. Tough to admit we made a mistake. God does know best. He knows what's the best for us in life. Now this leads to two very fundamental principles. Only God has the power to put things right. You can use the parent-child relationship there as an illustration of this. The parent has to take the initiative to put things right. The parent has to take the initiative when the child does respond to give the child a cuddle and accept them back. We're not able to put things right ourselves. We're just not strong enough, morally or ethically. But we have a responsibility. We must be willing. The child must be willing to say, "Sorry, Mummy, sorry, Daddy." The teenager might not say it that way, but the teenager by their action has to express their willingness to put things right, that they didn't know what was best, that they did mess up. Now these great principles are taught in Leviticus. They underpin the book. But they're principles that run right throughout into the New Testament, and they're true for life. Only God can put things right. He has got the power, the energy, the resources to do it. But He does not push us around. We must be willing to having things put right. The sacrificial system speaks about that. The person had to bring their offering to the tabernacle. They had to be involved in the messy business of an animal being killed or grain being prepared. But in the end of the day, only God had the power to put things right. Expressed in Leviticus, where the priest on behalf of God pronounced the acceptance before God. The actual sacrifice is a physical, visible symbol. It achieves nothing in itself. It's what's going on in the actual person. Are they willing? Are they responding? There are deep principles there for us today. And that's why the sacrificial system illustrates it so beautifully. Now just think for a moment. Here's a people. They're not literate. They're not educated. They've come out of slavery. They've got a slavery mentality. They don't understand the nature of God. They're carrying over ideas from the Egyptian culture. Here is a physical demonstration of God's ethical and moral perfection, and that God will put things right, but the people have to be willing. And the willingness is expressed in giving of their best, their most valuable, animals or grain, as an expression that they want to put things right. They have messed up, and that God does know best. And they want to go God's way. That's the context of Leviticus. Let's expand this slightly. The individual brings their best, and you can see this in Leviticus, the best animal. Now often it's a male animal because the male is not capable of breeding and producing offspring. That's wise. But they sacrifice their best, recognizing that God deserves the best. But the individual confesses the rebellion, the symbolism of this, that they press their hands hard on the head of the animal. The symbolism is there. They are admitting we got it wrong. We rebelled. We didn't do it the way we should have done it. We've hurt other people, whatever the thing is. The priest, acting on behalf of God, pronounces God's acceptance. Because only God can accept us back. We can't earn it. We can't impress God. We can't push him around. We can't demand it. Only God can give it. And he'll give it to those who are willing to receive it. God gives the acceptance, and the priest pronounces it on his behalf. So that God accepts the rebel back. If you look at a young child who's done something particularly naughty, reprimanded by the parent, the child expresses their regret, perhaps with tears, perhaps saying, "I'm sorry." But the key thing is, the parent opens their arms, physically or metaphorically, and accepts the rebel back. The child is loved, wanted, respected, cared for. That's just a picture, perhaps an inadequate picture, but a picture of how God relates to us. Now I said we look at this word atonement. It occurs all over the place in Leviticus. But we need to put a kind of health warning against that word. The danger is this. We assume that what the word means in English for us today is what the Old Testament means. We've got to go back and look at the original words, the context, and not read back our English 21st century ways of thinking of things and read it backwards into a book written millennia ago. So perhaps you have to strip away ideas that have been passed to you or that you've developed. Just clear your mind now. And let me just unpack a little bit about what the word meant. That is not surprising. You probably would have expected it. Even within Leviticus, the word occurs all over the place. What is surprising is this. The actual Greek word in the New Testament that translates the Hebrew word in the New Testament is only used twice. The idea is implicit in one or two other places, but the word is only used twice. Perhaps a bit surprising. Now the key thing is this, that the actual words refer to a place, not an event. And surprisingly, in the Old Testament, the place of atonement is the cover over the Ark of the Covenant. Indeed, the word atonement and cover are related. Now just hold on to your seat. That is just the factual evidence. We are talking about a place. Now with that in mind, let's just look at this a bit further. Here is the key passage from Exodus. Moses is told, make an atonement cover of pure gold. That was the rarest metal of the day. 2.5 cubits long and 1.5 cubits wide. Make 2 cherubim out of hammered gold at the ends of the cover. Make 1 cherub at one end and the second cherub on the other. Make the cherub of one piece with the cover at the 2 ends. The cherubim are to have their wings spread upward, overshadowing the cover with them. The cherubim are to face each other looking toward the cover. Place the cover on top of the ark, and put in the ark the tablets of the covenant law that I will give you. There, above the cover, between the 2 cherubim that are over the ark of the covenant law, I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites. It's the same word. Now the translators, to make some sense of it, have put in the word atonement. But the word actually means cover. Atonement means cover. It's a place. The Ark of the Covenant, which housed the 10 Commandments. This is the lid, the cover. Cherubim symbolizing God's presence, one at each end of the cover. So God's presence is above the cover. You can see from the design, the cherubim looking down over the cover. God's presence which is above the cover, and the cover is above the 10 Commandments. And again, we've got to think about this as a physical symbolism, making a point for a people group who couldn't read or write, who'd come out of slavery and whose knowledge was very limited. Their understanding of God was very insecure. It's a beautiful picture. The cover represents the place where relationship is restored and direction can be given. I will meet with you and give you all my commands for the Israelites, says God. Inside this box, because all it was, the Ark of the Covenant, a gold-covered box, were the Ten Commandments, which symbolized human rebellion. We don't keep them. We prefer to do it our way. Above the Ark of the Covenant was symbolized the place of God's presence. The cover was the place of relationship. So remember, atonement is a place where relationship is restored and where direction can be given. Now that goes right back to its construction, and the word is there. Now the only two places in the New Testament are here. The writer to the Hebrews, above the ark were the cherubim of the glory, overshadowing the atonement cover. A place. It's an exact picture of what Moses was told in Exodus. And in Romans, God presented Christ as a sacrifice of atonement through the shedding of his blood to be received by faith. But the key thing is this. We take that second text and read all sorts of Western 21st century ideas into it. The atonement cover of the Hebrews text and the sacrifice of atonement are the same word. And it's a place. Jesus is the place. The place where God and man can be brought together, where relationship can be restored. In him, in his life, in his death, because it speaks of the shedding of his blood. In him, that is the place of relationship restoration. And being received by faith stresses human response, which Leviticus stresses again. We've got to bring the sacrifice, lay our hands on it. We accept what God can do for us and wants to do for us, and the relationship can be restored. It's a place. That is the significance of atonement. Now we can summarize it this way in New Testament terms. The sacrifice of Jesus in his death on the cross is the place where relationship is restored. The rebellion of humanity is covered, and I'm playing with words there, because the atonement cover is the place of atonement. And where new direction can be given as it was to Moses. God can take our lives, restore our lives, accept us back, and reorientate us into a new way of living. That is the New Testament picture, and it all derives from the sacrificial system. So the word atonement carries great depth and meaning, but it is a place. In interpreting Leviticus, context is everything. We saw that it was written to a people group with this kind of picture. They weren't literate, they weren't educated, they were confused. And they still had a slavery mentality. But the context is that. Little understanding about God at all. How were they going to understand God? God gave it to them in pictures, in actions, in activities, to a people who couldn't read or write. You see, they carried with them the baggage of the past. Their Egyptian gods around about them were to be appeased. The gods had certain areas of life and death. They were often territorial. They worked only in certain places. But the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob that Moses was leading them to understand was the God who is the creator of everything. The one and only God, ethically and morally perfect, and who wanted humanity to enjoy life to the full. That's a different kind of picture of God from anything they understood from their past. God wanted the best for them. And he wants the best for you and me today. But the recognition was that we humans rebel. We want to do it our way. And as a result, we fail to find God's ways of living, the best ways, the richest ways, the most fulfilled ways. Now, the sacrificial system in picture form gives us wonderful insights. Let me just look at the 5 sacrifices again. Now, I'm not saying this is a complete. Possible interpretations. There may be more. You can maybe see other things in it. But the burnt offerings, we recognize we've messed up good and proper. We take the best that we've got when we watch it going up in smoke. This represents the way we need to die to our failure, to leave behind our past and respond to God. Gratitude. We take the best of our crops. Gratitude for all that God has done for us. Celebration. Celebrating all that God has for us and all He's done for us, but with a desire we want to go forward His way. Recognition that very often we fail and we don't always do it deliberately. But these failures affect us and others. And this leads to affecting others. There's a need for reparation. We need to put it right. Now, that's not necessarily the whole story or complete picture. The limits of a screen means I've got to summarize things quite a bit. But here are deep lessons to be taught to this desert group of ex-slaves that the system was revealing to them by actions, by events, by things they did. But at the same time, the system that was set up here that God directed them to pointed to something greater and deeper that was fulfilled in the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus. That's something of the meaning of the sacrificial system. The oneness of God, His sovereignty, the Creator God of the universe, stressed so strongly. God who has every aspect of life under control. And we don't. We need His direction. God who's morally and ethically perfect, unlike the gods of the nations of the other people groups round about. And the fact that we mess up all the time. God who wants the best for His created creatures. Now that's a completely radical concept compared to the gods of other nations of that day. But we tend to rebel. I know best, I will do it my way. And the fact is that these two situations generate conflict. They're incompatible. And the sacrificial system is stressing the incompatibility of the oneness and perfection of God with the failure of humanity. And in physical actions that we take, we are expressing the reality of the situation and our desire to go God's way. This is the strange world of sacrifices, and I hope this has given us a new insight, that it was there for a very good reason, and a reason that still applies today. It taught the former slaves something of the nature of God, and the fact that they didn't do it His way. It illustrated the serious consequences. When we don't go God's ways, we mess ourselves up, we mess other people up, we mess our environment up. Damage is done, and it's serious. And this gave the people a way to respond, physically, to express their inner desire for something better. And it's a vivid picture of the seriousness of rebellion, because you are sacrificing your best as an expression of your willingness to have things put right. That is something of the meaning of the strange world of sacrifices. In the next presentation, we're going to look at something of the role of the priests in all of this.